I don't know if interest is the right word, but it's always like in the peripheral of my life, there was things trying to get me to be spiritual before my near-death experience, but I was just focused on mostly kind of partying and, getting a job and all that kind of stuff. And I was never such a great student when I was younger. I kind of joke around when I started paying for school, then I became a great student. But so I was living in Colorado in the U.S., and I was working in a restaurant, working from like 2 in the afternoon to midnight or whatever, drinking beer, smoking pot a lot. And I came back east in the Northeast in the U.S. to visit my parents, and they lived in Rye Brook, New York. And my roommate in Colorado was a friend of mine from when growing up. In high school, I knew him from when I was in elementary school, and then in high school we became friends. And so we came back to visit our parents. We drove all the way back, like without stopping, and we drove in his car. He had a Datsun 280Z, or like a sports car kind of thing. That was kind of fun to drive. And so we came back, got to the area where our parents lived, and we each went home to rest for a while because we drove basically straight through for like 1,800 miles. We heard, I don't remember if it was him or I that heard about a party a friend of ours from high school was having, and we decided to go. So I took my mom's little Ford Bobcat, and he drove in his nice 280Z. Or 240Z? I don't remember which one. 280. So at the party, we were partying, definitely, and I kind of pretended, or thought I pretended I was higher than I was, and told the young lady who was having the party that I was going to leave my car there, and I was going to have my friend drive me back to my parents' house where I was staying. But really my motive was to go back the next day and talk to her because I thought she was cute. And it was too noisy and she was busy hosting at the party. Almost back to my parents' house, I realized my sister needed my mom's car the next morning for work, so I had my friend bring me back to the party. He protested a bit because of what I had said to him, which was I was too drunk to drive. And I explained I didn't really feel too drunk. I just wanted to go back the next day to talk to the girl, so he brought me there. I do remember walking through the party looking to tell the young lady, I say she's a young lady now, she was my age, but that I was going to, take my car. And I do remember walking towards the door to leave the party. And, I still have the memory in my mind, and I, see the people there. They were like when you drink a bit too much, how everything's a little bright and a little hazy. So nowadays I would never, if that was happening, I would never drive, so, but it was in the 1970s. People were not thinking about, it was fine here in the U.S. to drink and drive back then. So, I do remember walking towards the door. The next thing I remember is being out of my body above the smashed car, looking down. My body was leaning against a tree like this. My legs were out in the ground. My body was against a tree. A police officer was crouching over me. I assume he pulled me out of the car, but I never checked back about that. And my head, you can maybe still see the scar a bit. Luckily, in men, having a scar is kind of, not considered a problem, really. So, and then I was in white light. It was white light all around me, even though it was dark down on Earth, and it was all white. Behind me was this big circle of white. Within there was like a full silhouette of a white person. It was just white, like no features, and all these different shades of white, like radiating off of that being. The timing I don't really know because it seemed like there was no time, And even though it's in my memory, it didn't take that long. During the experience, it seemed like it could have been forever, because it was just like right then and now. But it felt so nice. Like, people asked me, did I have a body? It felt like I had a body. I didn't look down to see if I saw a body, but it had a feeling to it. So I'm a very kinesthetic person, and part of my belief is that God speaks to us in our language. So my language is definitely physical feeling a lot, and so it just felt so nice. I had a knowing, or it's still hard to explain even though it was many years ago, but it was more of, rather than knowing, it was more of being a part of and knowing. Because knowing is almost something from the outside, but this was part of it. It's like being part of the universe, part of the spirit, part of everything, and anything that, I was in my early 20s and just thinking of the struggles of work or, dealing with my family or things like that. Everything just seemed okay. Like, oh yeah, of course, that's fine. It's all peaceful and loving and caring and healing. And then the being behind me, and someone also said to me one time, so you could see behind you. It's like, well, it's not even, like seeing something is almost from the outside. This is like just knowing. And I still have an image of it from behind me. Like, in my mind, I can see behind me, but it's not like I turn my head that way or anything. And the being said, you have to go back. Your father wants you to stay. I knew right then that that father was God, not my physical father. And in the spirit of everything's just so perfect, I went back into my body, and I came to 3 days later in the hospital. It was just such a knowing and loving, and just, even when I think about it now, my energy expands and it's like, oh, the world is good. And then it's a little confusing because there's obviously certain things in the world that are not so good. Yeah, yes. It is great. And, I can use that for meditation, those visions. And so when I work with people, I can help them connect into that energy. It's really cool. Yeah, my understanding of what happened kind of came after. So this is in the early or mid-1970s. And, I didn't never heard of a near-death experience. I did have some interactions with some spiritual things, but it was always, like I had read Autobiography of a Yogi before that, but that was something that was really for other people, like, these devout yogi, and nothing like a normal person like me would ever experience. Something that was really cool that happened was, so I was living in Colorado. This happened in the Northeast, actually in Port Chester, New York is where the accident happened. And then I moved back, after healing a bit, I moved back to Colorado. My mom kind of bribed me and convinced me to move back to the Northeast and work in my dad's company. And one day I was sitting in my apartment and someone knocks on the door, which, again, nowadays I actually assume it's an Amazon package. But back then, I would get up and open the door. Like now, if someone knocks, I don't even answer unless, they knock a few times because I assume it's the UPS guy. And but this gorgeous woman was at the door and said to me, I'm the sister of a friend of yours from Colorado. She was one of the people I mentioned my experience to, and this woman said, and I heard some cool things about you. And she pretty much directly right away said, I want to introduce you to this spiritual teacher who teaches people about what happens when we die. It was so cool. And it's funny because I've just kind of taken that for granted until maybe a year ago. I realized, wow, that's really amazing that this woman showed up I didn't do anything. I didn't, I knew I had this amazing experience, but I didn't know what to do with it. Like, I didn't want to tell people, so it was very cool. So when she introduced me to him, and he read a book he wrote, and when he first started talking to me directly, he started to talk to me about Mary, Jesus' mother, and just how open she was to God's love. And just when, even now I say that's like, oh, I want to let that loving in, and that openness and that love of God, and that really described my experience. Then he started talking about Jesus, and it was like, oh, that being behind me was Jesus, and just the energy of it. And he talked about the ocean of divine love and benevolence. And he was an Islamic Sufi teacher, and these are things that are part of the Islamic religion, but they really gave me words to explain my experience, because I did not know what to make of it. I had some things changed in me. There's no doubt about that. Probably the biggest thing was I was just very curious to know, and I needed to know. And still, that's what I feel like. So I've been studying this stuff. I meditate every day, do a lot of personal growth stuff, and still there's just so much more to know. There's an infinite amount of stuff in spirit. There's an infinite amount of love and healing from God, and there's always more to go. The other thing that happened is my hands start to become very warm, and this still happens when I touch someone, like almost instantly. And again, didn't know what to make of that. Nowadays people know about healers and stuff, and my only knowing about healers was on like Star Trek, the original Star Trek series. And there was like, of course I kind of fantasized, oh, I could do that, but I thought it wasn't really real. So, and I just had some things happen. One of the early things was a friend of mine, actually my friend's father, who I was friends with also, he told me his father. So my friend's grandfather was very sick, and I said to him, I'll pray for him. And I did, and I felt something happen. And again, I didn't go check right away, because I thought it was just some, my ego or something. But when I saw the father the next time, he said, I think something happened when you prayed, because that day he got so much better, where they were thinking he was going to die any day to where he lived for months longer. Again, not really knowing what to do with this, but started learning eventually from this teacher who was an amazing healer in his own right, and he would tell me I was a sensitive, which I knew was good because he called himself that in his book. And then I started to learn, and I've met lots of other people who teach spiritual things and methods for healing and everything. Well, my whole mission in life became, maybe changing me is the wrong word, but it just made me aware of my mission in life, which it is that I do meditate every day. I heal people, but I take it very seriously. So I spend hours every morning doing journal writing, doing Tai Chi, some yoga, meditating. There's some other things I do from time to keep my energy clear, to align more and more with the spirit. So I think getting help from someone who knows more than you is really important, because my near-death experience was really a big thing, but like I said, I didn't even know what to do with it. Most of the really big explosions in awareness after that happened with the assistance of spiritual teachers. So, a lot of times, and I understand, sometimes I wish I could do, I can do a lot myself now, but sometimes I wish I could do it all by myself, but I realize that really is the ego, and, God's gifts come however they come. And if there's someone, it's kind of like, doing some home improvement things. If, you ask someone who knows more than you, you get help from people when there's things you don't know. So that's important. But meditation and journal writing are probably the main two things people can do to help themselves. Yeah, so that meditation brings the spiritual energy in, helps you connect to the spiritual energy outside of you, and opens up the loving inside. It's really, and that is something, basically I learned that from the Sufi Sheikh, that's what the teacher was called, and I've learned it's it's in many different traditions, that meditation, because I've learned it from Christian people, Jewish people, and it's like there's some, there's a little tweaking in there. Each person has their own kind of variety on it, but if you really stick to that. So basically, if you watch that basic soul meditation, I think it's like 13 minutes long, but once you learn how to do it, so there is the breathing, there's the focusing, and there's inner chanting. You could do it for a few minutes a day, and it would really make a difference. I mean, the meditation is the most important spiritual growth tool there is, by far, definitely. The history that I looked at shows that goes back actually to ancient Egypt. Someone I was talking to once said there's times before that it came up, but it is in Sanskrit. It is. So I learned that from the Sufi Sheikh, and the definition I really like that he gave. So in the Islamic religion, they have the 99 names of God. And so each name is a different attribute of God, and they give their kids those names. But there's way more than 99. I don't know why it was originally called 99. So it could be like strength or awakening or, these different attributes. And what he said was in the Hu sound is all the names together. So it's all the vibrations of God. It also connects to, so a lot of people chant Om, which is to the mental level in spirit, which is a very powerful thing, but the Hu sound goes up to the soul level, which is more of what I want to be doing, and connects there. So Hu in Sanskrit, my understanding is it means God. Yeah, almost the opposite, because it just looked like everything was good. That was the thing. And it's not like, whoopee, it's a party. It was just like this peaceful, oh yeah, everything makes sense, and there's, again, part of it is being part of it and just knowing, as opposed to on the outside and figuring it out mentally. I definitely get information. When people say download, I don't quite relate to that word, because to me, the idea is to continually be connected to that. So it's this ongoing process. And, I'm definitely not perfect at it, so it's always working at it. I mean, there are times I get more of an aha understanding. When I work with people, I know a lot of stuff about them, but it doesn't feel, I don't know, when people say download, it almost like this intense information comes in all at one time or something. And well, sometimes it's like that, but there's always something gentle and loving with the process, and it's more of being a part of this flow, as opposed to, like, download would imply something from outside is coming in, and I just don't quite experience it that way. But I do get information all the time about people I'm working with, about myself, about my family, sometimes about things in the world and understanding stuff like that. Like I said in the beginning, I mentioned it not really knowing how to describe it to just a few people. So when I was with the Sufi Sheikh, he had a near-death experience, and a lot of people that studied with him did. But we didn't use that word, but everyone kind of knew what we were talking about. And so he would teach classes about what happens after you die, and we used the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And so we were talking more about spiritual experiences and not actually putting so much significance on the actual near-death experience. A couple of things come to mind. One thing, I'd say about 5 years ago, I was teaching a class at the University of Bridgeport, and I would go there like once a year for a while as a guest professor, and I would teach, they have like a mindfulness class there I would teach at, and then I would do a workshop, usually on breathing or some other kind of self-care stuff. And after the woman who used to set that up for me, after the mindfulness class, she said she was going to be teaching this class about death and dying, or living and dying. I don't remember the name of it, but then I said, I had a near-death experience. So I knew that word by then, but I didn't realize so many people were interested in it. And she said, you got to come to my class and share your story. And so I posted something on Facebook, I'm going to be teaching this class on death and dying, and talk about my near-death experience, and so many people said, "Oh, I want to hear about it." So that became a whole lot more permission to start talking about it. Like now it's everyone loves to hear about it. So I got a lot of permission. One really nice thing that happened, so my dad actually passed away a couple of weeks ago, and so it's nice to be able to support him spiritually in that process for him, which was really nice. And he was 92. He had lived a good life, and but I don't know how many years ago. I guess it was just a few years ago. So when he was in his early 80s, he met this woman, and they fell in love. And he loved her so much, and she loved him. It was just this nice thing. But he really started to open up emotionally. Even though he was in his late 80s at this point, he was very sharp. It's not like he was, his mind was going at all. But he must have looked me up online and saw about my near-death experience, and he said he had a near-death experience, but his near-death experience was he was driving, actually when he was in the Marines, and he was driving, because my mom didn't always live with him when he was in the Marines, and he was driving back to, the place where he lived as a Marine, and he fell asleep, and then some gravel on the side of the road woke him up. So he didn't really have a near-death experience, but he was saying, if he didn't wake up, he might have died. But it was interesting because he really wanted to connect. So in a loving way, he was saying, thinking at a near-death experience just to bond with me, which is really nice. Until maybe 6 months ago, he seemed perfectly healthy, and you'd see him, you would have never guessed he was in his 90s. You would have guessed he was like 70. He would play tennis, regularly, and very active. But within those 5 to 6 months, he really deteriorated quickly. And for him, at the end, like the last definitely 2 months, or definitely 1 month, he was not a happy camper, and he was frustrated. He couldn't talk, he couldn't move as well. And so for him, he was way happier. But he was very happy in the spirit. He was like moving around, like, almost like a kid running around just with so much energy. So, yes, in the spirit, we're just happier. That's all there is to it. There are sometimes people get stuck in the spirit, and actually people ask me to check in on their loved ones sometimes, and if they're kind of stuck, there's ways to help them. But I was really happy. So near the end, I would sit there with my dad and just meditate for a long time, and tell him it's okay. And since he did open up the discussion about my near-death experience, I told him that I got a view into what it was like, and that it would be okay. And, that my sense and knowing was that my mother, who had died years ago, was going to be there to meet him. And that part was really nice. And he wasn't a very spiritual person, even though he did really open up emotionally a lot more. But there was a couple of times he really just got it, and he couldn't talk, and he'd reach for my hand and bring my hand to his mouth and kiss it, just to express his loving and caring. It was really beautiful. I'm not afraid of after death, but I definitely am hoping, both my parents didn't really have to, suffer for very long before dying, so I'm hoping that happens for me. I'm not. The part after death is, it's like a party, to tell you the truth. So it's really good. With my dad, it was a little clearer because he was definitely suffering. But it was a little confusing that my dad wasn't around. It still is a little bit. And I'm 68, so it's kind of funny. But even when I think about things, there was something in reference to him that was there that's a little different on the physical level. But spiritually, it is a great thing. With my mom, I remember going from being so joyful that she was going to be connecting into... when people get close to passing away, they connect into the spirit a whole lot more. And I remember sitting in the limousine for her funeral, going from, oh, this is the greatest joy in the world, to crying that my mom wasn't around anymore. So there's, both those parts, our spiritual part and our physical part. But it was nice at my dad's funeral. I was remembering things from early ages. And I don't know, one thing I'll say, I went to a baseball game with him for the New York Yankees, and both Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle hit 2 home runs. And that was one of my memories. It's such a great game to have been at. And, it is, in life, even away from death, it's good to acknowledge the good things that happen. In your day-to-day life, it's easy to get caught up in the struggles of paying the bills, dealing with family drama, and, and whatever that is. But to acknowledge those little things with family, to acknowledge those triumphs at work, to acknowledge, the accomplishments, and make sure you make a mental note of that. It is part of the spiritual journey to keep choosing into those gifts from God and inside of you and outside of you. So it definitely applies to passing, but it applies to life all the time. The meditation I mentioned, the journal writing, those are probably the 2 basic things to do. There's this other thing on my YouTube channel called Freedom Writing that is another great tool. That's more for clearing. It clears a lot of stuff, but the thing you feel, I describe as it kind of clears the cobwebs out of your head and your emotions. And working with someone who, like me, who knows more and knows how to do that is probably, but try meditating every day. Also, getting some physical exercise is really important, even if it's just going for a walk for 20 minutes. Taking care of yourself, treating your body and your emotions and your mind like they're a temple. And it is, and you want to honor that and respect that. The thing I said about honoring, noticing those little good things in life, but really important also noticing how your qualities are part of that. So our soul and our gifts from God are our qualities. Like if you're intelligent or a hard worker or creative or whatever this is, those are gifts from God. And when you express those and that you have those to recognize and be grateful and thankful, that's what's really important. My website is lawrencebrock.com. My YouTube channel is Dr. Lawrence Brock. I have TikTok, which is doc.brock, doc.brock at TikTok. My phone number is 732-567-6388. And you can text me, or that's on WhatsApp also for texting on there. There's a lot of good videos on my YouTube channel, so more than what teaching, it does teach you, but what I do during a session with me is you get the experience. I can also clear off any negativity that's around you and help realign things in your all different levels of your consciousness to line up with your spiritual unfoldment. Yes, it could be your chakras. There are many, many things you can check, but it's I don't know, the way I talk, I guess emotionally it's kind of like that you are open to these miracles happening. And then it's like the energy opens up and connects into the spirit. But it could be balancing the chakras. It could be checking acupuncture points, any of your systems in your body. There could be memories from other lifetimes, memories from this lifetime. There's just so many things to check. And normally I just know intuitively where to go and what to talk to you about. And then it opens that up mentally, and then the energy comes in. There's also all these wonderful beings in spirit that come in to help during the session, and that changes from person to person. Again, I don't particularly like that word, but it's more, so these beings come in, they're not necessarily coming through my body. Sometimes I see things either out here or in my mind's eye. Sometimes I hear things. So it's more like being a vessel for spirit in whatever way that is. I'm not necessarily opposed to channeling, but the purpose is healing and spiritual alignment for the person. I do get a lot of benefits from that because the energy is really quite amazing, but it is asking these like beings, there's angels, there's saints, there's healing masters, there's teachers in the spirit that come in and work with the person that's working with me. Yeah, it's so cool, right? Oh no, I am every day like that. It's like the most amazing thing, right? I did have some of the abilities, but I kind of ignored them in a certain way. I mean, I had some things even thinking about like that, I ignored it. It was like, how in the world? Because it just, I don't know. Like sometimes I wonder if I see, so when I was in my late teens, I saw my past grandfather in the movie theater. So, and he was a unique looking guy. So it's not like it could have been someone who looked like him. And, I just kind of, so I was sitting in like the 10th row on the side of watching this tapi, and I saw this guy from the back in the front row in the center. And I walked around the front just to check, and I looked at him, and it was him. But I didn't stop and talk to him or anything. I just kept going, like I didn't know what to make of it. And I left. I was with my brother, and I said, "Did you see Pop in the front row there?" He just said no. Again, he didn't say like, "What, are you kidding?" It was funny that and then I just kind of went back to my life. And sometimes I wonder if it still happens that I see past people without even realizing it. Because he looked, and I've seen some things, sometimes they look as solid as you. You can't really tell the difference visually. So, but, I did have, I played sports a lot, and there's a lot of moments where, like when you're in the zone and you're just connected to this thing beyond you. I had some experiences like that, but I wouldn't think of it as spiritual. I wouldn't even line it up with that. The thing is, seeing my grandfather, it's kind of amazing that I just let it go. And, I didn't even know, it's not like I thought, oh, you're crazy or anything like that. I just kind of let it go. And, well, I think it was just because it was really a part of my nature, and I just hadn't been aware of it yet, so I didn't think of it as that crazy. And, looking back, I was just I'm being pushed in that direction all the time, even though my mind accepts it a lot now, but still there are things that are still beyond my understanding, and there's always like a pulling, and like sometimes, oh man, I have to be nice to that person. And it's like, yeah, you got to be nice to everybody, and you don't get to choose who and when. You get, if you're committed to doing the spiritual work, you do it. It's not like, oh, I'll just do it on Sunday at church kind of thing. It's like an everyday, all the time thing. I'm always amazed, and, every time I work with anyone, it's always like, wow, that is so cool. And when something happens that confirms it in the physical world, then it's like, wow, that's really cool, It's kind of like, it's always the same procedure of acceptance and knowing the person's good and aligning them with spirit and working with the spiritual masters and stuff. But sometimes things happen in a little bit of a variety that, because people just ask me about all sorts of things, and part of me goes, I don't know anything about that. And then it's like, then I do that thing, and sometimes I'll know something about it, but more importantly, things shift for the person in a really cool way. One thing happened, and it was a little bit after that thing that happened at the University of Bridgeport, because that's when I started posting stuff on social media, and it was around Thanksgiving time here in the U.S., and I was just, looking through my emails and stuff, partially to look for stuff to post, but also looking for things to be grateful for. And I came across this email from this client this was someone I saw in person, but her friend kind of forced her to come see me because she didn't believe in what I did. But she had had a miscarriage, and something happened to her physically where she was getting very sick, and the doctors told her, forget about ever having a child. At this point, we're, concerned about even saving you. And she came to me. After 2 sessions, she wrote me this email saying, I don't know what you do, but I'm getting better, and the doctors can't believe it. Maybe a year later, I heard she was pregnant, and then she ended up having a baby boy. And I saw this, and I was like, right, exactly, like, wow. It's a great thing. So, yeah. And, there's a lot of things like that have happened, but that was something where I just like, wow, what I do is really cool. And I don't know, I still feel a little humble about it, even to tell people, especially if they're going to think I'm a little cuckoo, which I guess I am. But, it's so cool. That was a big step towards that I do this thing that helps people get healed. Yeah, it's the support of other people. There's a big part of movement in this that's really important, but it's good to find other people that are interested and do, so there is that I help other people, but it's important to always work on myself, and, I take classes and read books, and, the journal writing is a self-exploratory process of learning how to, when I said, oh, I have to be nice to this person, sometimes it's a process to be, how can I be in my spiritual loving in relation to everything? And sometimes that's not so easy. Yeah. Well, we kind of have to love it all. So that's even ourselves and our humanness. And it's a balance all the time. And I've learned, I'm always learning a lot, but it seems, and a lot of times it's like, oh, I knew that. How come I didn't really get it? But in the last few months, I've just had a lot more awareness and awakening about handing it over to God, because, I don't know, it seems like the most basic spiritual principle, but something in me just has really learned to do that a whole lot more. And that is another great gift, to be able to let go and let God. And everything starts with yourself, like love yourself, and then love your neighbors, take care of yourself, and take care of others. Things are good, that everyone has these special qualities, and it might be expressed it's easy to see what I do, that it's spiritual, but anything, any work that you do can be spiritual. Anything you do, I can, all these things come, help be of service, and, but first, God, then you, then your family, and then your community kind of thing, so.